the lives of so many people in so many ways and so many countries. Since its first emergence in China, it has rapidly spread globally around the world, including Indonesia and Aceh also, posing challenges and severely disrupting the entire human population in health, economic, education, social, and other sectors. The contribution from the academics, from the researchers, from the government official, and other relevant parties through the finding of the research, which then discussed and shared through this conference, is expected to be one of the contribution to address global issues of the COVID-19 crisis, especially in the social and political area. In this opportunity, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Peter Charles Taylor, Professor Hermin Indah Wahyuni, Associate Professor Dr. John Mccarthy, Associate Professor Dr. Samsudin Eltaya, and Associate Professor Dr. Yusliza Muhammad Yusuf as a keynote speakers from their willingness to talk at this conference. Many thanks also goes to presenters and general participants and invited guests for their participation in this conference. And then I would like to thank to the sponsor for their great support, and my high appreciation goes to the committee members of this international conference 2020 and all the parties who have been working very hard for making this event possible. Even this conference is held virtually due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I believe that it will be an enjoyable conference. And I wish everyone, every participant, even general participant, a very fruitful and rewarding conference. Finally, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open this international conference on social science, political science, and humanities 2020. Thank you, and billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to Ibu Julie Murshida. Maybe do you want to di tempatnya di atas? Okay. Next, the next agenda is a handover of Certificate of Appreciations. We'd like to invite Colonel Sumirating Baskoro and also Bapak Yukon Afrinaldo to... Okay. We have small, it's actually very small certificate of appreciations, and will be handed over by Ibu PR1, Ibu Julie Murshidah PhD. Next certificate will be handed over by Dean of Faculty of Social and Science, Bapak Nazaruddin. Thank you very much. We are very grateful and happy to have both of you here. And we are also very thankful for your contributions. We hope that the collaboration between our university and your institution will last forever. Thank you very much. I would like to address something to our audiences. There is a slight complaint from our participants online that the background noise is kind of disturbing and it sort of disturbs the attention and also the presentations coming from the speakers. We will be very happy if you may keep silence so that our audiences online can pay attention even better. Thank you very much. Next agenda is keynote speech sessions. Today we have 5 keynote speakers and we'd like to invite our keynote speakers. First, Associate Professor Dr. John Mccarthy. He is from the Australian National University, Canberra, Australia. His expertise is agriculture, policy, livelihood analysis, and food security. He also has some interest in Asian studies, including Indonesia. Second speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Yusliza Muhammad Yusuf from University of Terengganu, Malaysia. Her specialization is human resource management and organizational behavior. Third speaker is Professor Peter Charles Taylor, PhD, MED, DEed, BSc, currently Professor of Transformative Education, School of Education, Mordrock University, Australia. Next is Dr. Shamsuddin El Taya, Professor of Political Science at Bangsamoro, the Philippines. Our fifth speaker is Professor Dr. Hermin Indah Wahyuni from University of Gajah Mada. She completed her bachelor and master degree in Gajah Mada and her PhD in Leipzig University, Germany. Now, we also would like to invite Bapak Director for today, Bapak Dr. Rashidin Essos MA. He is going to be the moderator for the speakers. So we'd like to welcome all the speakers and Bapak Moderator to the stage. Now the time is yours. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Raditu billahi rabba wa bil islami dina wa bi Muhammadin nabiyya wa rasula. Good morning and for everyone, we praise to our Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, mercy and blessings and salawat and salam to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace to be upon him. Ladies and gentlemen, the first time I would like to Honorable Mr. Rector of Malikus Saleh University atau Universitas Malikus Saleh, and Honorable to our Dean of Social and Political Science Faculty and staff, Honorable the next speaker, the keynote speaker who have attended in ICoSPOLHM seminar this morning, And thanks a lot for joining us today. And then I would like to thank the committee who have been working hard to prepare this event in the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, before the keynote speaker presenting the result, we would like to introduce all of them by one. The first one, Associate Professor Dr. John Mccarthy from Australian National University. The second one, Associate Professor Dr. Yusriza Muhammad Yusuf from University Malaysia Terengganu. And the third one, Professor Dr. Peter Charles Taylor from Murdoch University, Australia. And then Professor Dr. Hermin Indah Wahyuni from Universitas Gajah Mada, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And the last one, Associate Professor Dr. Shamsuddin El Taya from Development Academic of the Bangsa Moro, Philippines. Okay. Associate Professor Dr. John Mccarthy from Australian National University. He also an anthropologist. He also very knows about Indonesia, and also very much experience from Indonesia. Therefore, we can invite him today to presentation about all the article, or I mean the research paper. Okay, now we will start. The first keynote speaker is Professor Associate Professor Dr. John Mccarthy from Australian National University. So we should be give time just only 20 minutes to present his result or article. Okay, Mr. Professor, I would like to invite you to present your article right now, please.
Halo, selamat pagi kepada semua teman-teman di Unimal, termasuk Pak Nizalin yang wakil dekan sekarang saya mendengar, dan juga kepada Ibu Nuwita yang teman lama saya. Saya masih
Can you hear me?
Ingatan baik dengan teman-teman. Bisa mendengar saya? Jelas? Okey, saya senang sekali bisa kembali ke Aceh pada saat ini, walaupun tidak secara fisik, tapi secara virtual.
Mute.
Maka terima kasih atas undangan, dan saya dengan senang hati mau kasih presentasi hari ini. Maaf ya, saya tidak bisa terlalu lama di Unimal sekarang karena sesudah presentasi nanti siang ada acara di kampus di ANU ini. Mungkin saya bisa lihat, mungkin saya share screen ya. Oke. Bisa lihat itu? Sudah jelas? Oke, thanks Ibu Hermin, dan salam juga kepada panelis yang lain. Sayang sekali tidak bisa minum kopi gayo di Lux Marway sekarang bersama-sama dan lebih menikmati cuaca, termasuk rumah makan itu di Marway yang saya masih rindu makan ikan di sana. Oke, maaf ya saya pakai bahasa English. mungkin sebagian bahasa gado-gado, beberapa bahasa English dengan bahasa Indonesia. Oke. Maka hari ini saya mau berbicara sedikit tentang refleksi tentang keamanan pangan di Indonesia, karena saya termasuk penulis laporan ini yang ada di sebelah kanan. Ada satu bab tentang Indonesia. Ini belum, it's not yet launched, this publication, ya. Mungkin minggu depan diresmikan. And we have one paper on Indonesia in one chapter, which I wrote with a number of colleagues. Sebenarnya saya mau Aceh masuk di dalam publikasi ini, tapi waktu itu tidak sempat. Tapi pada saat ini, si Somil dari Universitas Al-Muslim dan Ibu Nawita Malati membantu saya siapkan bahan ini dengan beberapa refleksi tentang Aceh. Okay, so ini yang saya lakukan hari ini, 4 poin ini ya. So kalau kita lihat masalah-masalah atau tantangan, the challenges faced by Indonesia, kita bisa lihat ada beberapa tantangan. Firstly, poverty, but stunting is still quite high. In some districts in Aceh, stunting is as high as 30 to 40%. In Indonesia, unfortunately, there is a deficit in rice. Pemerintah juga harus mengkhawatirkan kadang-kadang apakah harus import. And food prices in Indonesia with rice and a few other products are above the global average. So many farmers in Indonesia are exposed to climate change, pests and diseases. In many parts of Indonesia, we see shifts, people moving away from food crops to cash crops, which means that when a crisis like COVID comes, they have a problem. Karena tidak bisa makan sawit kan, bisa dijual. Tapi kalau harganya turun, mau makan apa ya? Becomes a challenge, yeah. So it's a problem for like coffee producers in the Gayo Highlands. Also, we have increasing land shortages, dependence on labor markets. The labor market not always giving good opportunity for people. In many parts of Indonesia, we have a forest transition. I used to live in Tepak Tuan at one time in my career. I spent a year in Tepak Tuan. For poor people in Tepak Tuan, if they don't have enough rice in the past, they could go to the forest. But in many parts of Indonesia, the forest is disappearing. So this is the loss of something that gave people sustenance. There's a lot of issues to do with a lot of challenges faced by women around nutritional issues. Ibu Nawita is doing her PhD on this, but I won't talk about this today. And then the good side is that the Indonesian government has now developed a lot of programs to help people who are food insecure, including social protection. So when I was working in sempat juga mengunjungi Aceh Besar dan Aceh Utara beberapa tahun yang lalu, we saw there were 3 main mechanisms that helped people escape from poverty or which led rural people to fall into food insecurity. So the first one, of course, is agriculture. So in Aceh, we had a very successful green revolution, which led to very high production of rice per hectare. But it's quite a high cost system. So people have to borrow money for inputs, which is a burden on small farmers, if they don't have access to capital. And in the villages where we did surveys, around 30 to 40% of farmers were petani bagi hasil. So this means that they have problems keeping their harvest. But the good news from what I hear from my friends in Aceh is that even with COVID-19, rice production is staying quite high. Aceh still has a lot of capacity to meet its own food needs. The only problem I understand is that during the last planting season, access to fertilizers was reduced. So we heard, Ibu Nawita was telling me that some farmers in Aceh Utara, their production is falling by up to 25% because they just couldn't afford or couldn't access fertilizer. But nonetheless, it's quite a positive story that Aceh is self-sufficient in rice, in fact has a surplus. But if we go more deeply into rural sociology, we look at the problem of the sharecropper. The sharecropper, it's a petani bagi hasil, they only usually retain 1/3 of their production. So if they get 8 hectares per year from their rice production, they have to they use 30% for paying their debt, and they pay 30% to the owner of the land, which means that instead of getting around somewhere near 20 to 25 million rupiah they only get 11 million. So this means that landowners and people who are able to diversify their income use the labor of the orang yang kurang mampu atau orang sedang, and they're able to accumulate resources in this way. But for the poor tenant farmers, they lose control of 2/3 of their rice harvest. So this is quite one of the mechanisms that makes people in rice producing areas poor. And in every village is, of course, a different number of people who are tenant farmers or landless, but these are usually the poor people. The second mechanism we need to look at when we understand poverty in Indonesia is the structure of the labour market. If you spend time in the village, lots of people want to merantau and they go to Banda Aceh or to Jakarta, but many people don't get wealthy this way because there are limited opportunities. But what we found in our survey is that the people who were able to leave poverty were those who were able to diversify out of agriculture and find work in the formal sector or in the informal sector while maybe keeping one foot in the rice lands, in the agricultural production. So the problem for all these people is that COVID-19, of course, has shut down employment opportunities. There are less remittances sent back to the village, and the prospects for finding ways out of poverty by diversification are much smaller. So what we found when we did our survey is that depending on the village, between 30 and 40% of people were cutting back on food in the waktu simpanan berkurang atau pajak klik in the scarcity season. They still eat lots of rice, but they don't eat lauknya kurang. First of all, fish. The first thing they cut back on is fish, and then, of course, the vegetables, although they can collect vegetables locally. So we found in our surveys, 60% of the people who were poor in the scarcity season were cutting back on this way. So substituting carbohydrates for proteins and vegetables. And of course, this is the problem of stunting. And in the 2 districts that we did our surveys in, the official statistics said that 30% and 43% of children were stunted due to this problem. So this is, I should have left these quotes in Bahasa Indonesia, I'm sorry about that. These are 2 quotes from Kepala Desa atau tokoh-tokoh adat, tokoh-tokoh desa. In my experience, most of the poor and frugal cut back on their food for periods of time, eating rice without much lauk. The poor can save. So people are saving by cutting back on their food. So maybe they don't understand the nutritional outcomes of food, but it's also, so you might say, orang desa itu kurang didik, but it's much more complicated than that because they have to make difficult choices. Do they pay jajan for their children or do they spend more money on fish? So from my perspective, I would say spend the money on fish, but for someone in the village, it's a matter of shame if their children go to school without the jajan, or if they can't ring somebody using their mobile telephone. So the third mechanism that's making people is the emergence of consumptive lifestyles. So nowadays, to be a villager, orang desa, in Aceh, we need to buy jajan for our children to go to school. Most people in the village aspire to a roof that doesn't leak, so they renovate their house, or they buy a parabola, or they pay for their motorbike phone. So I don't blame them, because I have all these things. And if you think about it, orang desa juga perlu itu, kan? If you live in the village, you need a roof that doesn't leak, and you need to communicate with people, so you want a mobile phone. But the jajan I find difficult to justify. But for orang desa, jajan is important aspect of what's considered to be normal. Okay, so this high expense consumptive lifestyle is a third mechanism making people insecure. So one of the conclusions from our research was that if we think of people moving out of poverty as moving forwards, a large number of people in Indonesia, in Aceh, are like a kepiting, like a crab. They don't move forwards, but they move sideways. So what they do is they combine limited agricultural opportunities with whatever labor, whatever work there is. For example, buruh kebun, musiman, or bagi hasil, and with their own production. And in this way, they are able to get by. And because they buy these things, when somebody comes along and does a survey for giving them pikaha, it looks like they're progressing. You know, they've got a nice roof, maybe they've got a motorbike, even though the motorbike's on credit. So when they do the survey from the government to look at who is progressing, who is coming out of poverty, they look like they're progressing. But many of these people remain insecure, cutting back on a period of the year. And unfortunately, I think, I'm not in Aceh, but from talking to my friends, I think for many of these buruh atau orang bagi hasil, for sure they can still eat, but makin susah keadaannya. So this means that, just coming now towards the end of my presentation, how am I going for time? I don't know, I've sort of lost track of time. I've only got 3 more slides to go. So if we look more generally and fit this into a wider story, the key driver of the problem is the return of migrants, the loss of remittances, the loss of work opportunities. Buruh, or those dependent upon insecure work or insecure enterprises, are clearly going to be suffering from having difficulties to access nutritious food. And the wider impact of the the contraction of the economy is leading to impacts on purchasing power and on diversification of livelihoods, which I've shown you in this presentation are critical to people's survival strategies. One thing we see in the highlands of Aceh is the collapse in the coffee price. So we get disrupted value chains. Now, this is not unique to Aceh. Our report, where we did interviews with many people across Indonesia, found this pattern. What came out of our work was that people have very clear local strategies to cope, and people moving back to agriculture, and we see a number of government programs to help this shift, with real challenges around investing in inputs. And we see these other programs to stabilize food prices, and social assistance nets, and local coping mechanisms, all working together to soften the impact of COVID. So from Australia, I feel assured that orang di Aceh akan bertahan, but the problem is this shift to more detrimental livelihood and food consumption strategies. Okay, that the patterns of cutting back, I would expect to get much worse. So one of the conclusions of our report is that impacts are very differentiated. By that I mean some people do well, or some people do better than others. So those with diversified livelihoods are able to do much better than people who are specialized in their livelihoods or dependent on a single commodity or on precarious wage labor. And we see this particularly in the oil palm areas where we see a lot of people having a very difficult time. I have a colleague from North Sumatra who is doing some work in the oil palm area. And fortunately, Aceh is much, much better than these areas just outside Medan. So the impact of all these changes is a change in consumption of protein and bioavailable nutrients. By that, bioavailable nutrients, it's just lack of consumption of things like fish, okay? So what we need to think about is a set of strategies that take into account these forms of vulnerability. Okay, so what we concluded in the report is that it's really important to build much more diverse livelihoods. And it's fortunate that many people in Aceh do have an element of diversity in their livelihood strategy. Compared to people who are living on oil palm estates, most people in Aceh have more diverse livelihood strategies, and they have elements of subsistence practices in their livelihoods. But what I would think about it in terms of policy is trying to support these sorts of diverse livelihood strategies. And I used to live in, like I said, in Tabak Tuan for a year, and I really was amazed by the system of the pala forests. Everywhere you go in Aceh, we find some kind of agroforestry system. And these are really important for people in Aceh to rebuild these systems and try and think about diversification, especially with climate change coming. Okay, so what I would suggest is that Aceh needs to develop a response that really speaks to the challenges that people in Aceh face. Okay, and social protection needs to be designed in a way that works with the logic of Achenese village life, okay? And that nutrition and health issues need to be integrated into agriculture and other policies. All right, so I think I've said enough. This is me with one of the Pak Camat I met while I was in Aceh. So I'd like to thank you all, and I'm happy to have a discussion. I hope I haven't gone for too long, but thanks again for the invitation to speak to you all today.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much for your explain about this event. We have understood about that. So next time, all audience and participant, now we are to this discussion and question session. Please mention your name and where you from. We would like to invite all participants to give some discussion about and question for our professor. Would you like to mention your name and where you from? Where you are from? If any question, you can ask right now, because it is a very important thing about the what we can get for, from the this discussion with our professor. Any question? Okay. I would like to ask your professor, this is the virus, this the virus COVID-19 very, very dangerous for our activities right now. Would you like to give us what is the best way how to overcome that this virus? Would you like to explain for all audience or our participant?
Could somebody write the question into the chat? Because I can't hear. I can't hear very well.
Excuse me, would you like to explain where is this virus very dangerous for our global activities? Where is the best way to overcome that virus and impact of that virus?
Sorry, I can't understand. I'm sorry. Mungkin ada penitia yang bisa menitik di dalam catatan ini. Mungkin saya bisa jawab dalam bahasa Indonesia, tidak apa-apa, mungkin akan lebih jelas. Tapi saya tidak paham apa pertanyaannya.
Okay, we know COVID-19 is very dangerous for our activities. All global problem, I mean. So where is the best way to overcome that problem according you, Professor?
Okay. You asking, maka pertanyaannya kalau saya mengerti, bagaimana bisa mengatasi masalah COVID ya? Sebenarnya masalah COVID ini sangat rumit. Saya lihat dari beberapa segi. Pertama, itu kita perlu vaksin ya. Maka itu akan ada proses waktu sebelum ada vaksin. Nah, sementara kita menunggu untuk vaksin, kita harus coba mencegah masyarakat. Maka virus itu tidak putar terlalu cepat di dalam masyarakat. Nah, itu saya lihat Indonesia ada beberapa program untuk sekarang ada program untuk self-isolation ya. Kalau dikena dengan gejala, harus diam di rumah aja ya. Kalau tidak salah ya. Di Aceh saya mendengar ada polisi seperti itu. Itu wajar sekali. Cuma tantangan untuk Indonesia adalah karena ekonomi itu harus tetap jalan, maka bagaimana kita bisa berdua-duanya sekaligus, mencegah dari virus dan ekonomi jalan sekaligus. Maka memang itu dilemas yang sangat rumit dan saya tidak bisa memberi semacam proposal untuk mengatasi itu. Tapi saya rasa kita bisa belajar dari tantangan yang masyarakat menghadapi waktu ini kan. Maka jangan kita harap untuk sesuatu yang tidak mendukung kemampuan dan resilience di dalam masyarakat. Itu mengapa saya lihat kita harus coba memberi akses terhadap tanah kepada masyarakat. Kita harus coba kembalikan atau hidupkan kembali nafkah hidup dulu yang cukup mendukung masyarakat untuk menghadapi tantangan. Karena saya dari dulu lihat masyarakat Aceh cukup kuat menghadapi tantangan. Saya sendiri tidak sekuat itu. Kalau saya lihat semua yang terjadi di Aceh dalam 30 tahun terakhir ini, luar biasa. Tapi kita harus coba pikir apa yang membuat orang Aceh, orang desa itu bisa bertahan. Dan itu tujuan saya dalam penelitian yang saya memberi itu masukan. Harus kita mendukung diversitas dan juga harus coba hidupkan pertanian yang dari zaman dulu mendukung masyarakat Aceh di desa. Bisa membahas lebih dalam di dalam laporan yang saya pasang tadi.
Thank you very much, Profesor. Barangkali ada yang ingin ditanyakan langsung dengan bahasa Indonesia juga boleh kepada Profesor yang menyampaikan beberapa hal tadi. Banyak hal sebenarnya kalau kita lihat di dalam mengatasi apa yang kita kenal dengan COVID-19 pandemic ini sangat sulit apa yang disampaikan oleh Profesor tadi. Namun rakyat Aceh masih tangguh dan sanggup menjaga dan melakukan berbagai perlindungan diri. Barangkali audien yang ada di seluruh di seluruh yang bisa menangkap jajaran kami ini jaringan kami ini boleh bertanya langsung dengan Profesor dalam bahasa Indonesia. Hanya satu pertanyaan lagi. Masih ada?
Maaf ya, saya kurang paham. Apakah orang bisa mengetik di dalam itu message? Maka saya bisa paham.
Ya boleh ada menggunakan bahasa Inggris dalam pertanyaan ini dan juga boleh menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Tapi bahasa Indonesia yang mudah dipahami oleh Profesor. Okay, thank you very much, Professor. It is very a lot of experience we can get from your explanation. Yeah. Okay, the time is over right now because
Okay, could I answer one question? I see in the question and answer. Ada pertanyaan, apakah maksudnya terhadap detrimental livelihood and food consumption strategy?
okay,
Is there any solution offered to solve this problem?
5 minutes more, Doctor.
So, what I mean by detrimental strategy, misalnya kalau masyarakat mengurangi makanan, itu strategi umum baik di Indonesia maupun di Australia kalau ada krisis seperti COVID ini kan. Itu juga banyak masyarakat Australia juga mengurangi makanan dan cuma makan karbohidrat. Maka sebenarnya ini sangat dilemis kan. Maka kita harus coba, saya lihat pemerintah banyak strategi untuk membantu masyarakat seperti itu. Tapi sejauh mana mereka sempat membeli makanan yang ada protein. Maka kalau mengurangi ikan satu hari mungkin bukan masalah besar, tapi kalau tetap dikurangi akan muncul stunting kan. Dan itu sedih sekali kalau untuk anak yang mengurangi protein food ikan seperti ikan. Kalau di Aceh biasanya orang makan ikan. Other strategies that people take up, mereka bisa menjual aset, bisa sebenarnya ada semacam if we sit in the kampung, then the first thing they do, then there's more and deeper problems. Ada masalah yang lebih dalam. Makin susah keadaan mereka, makin banyak masalah seperti itu. Sebenarnya in the long term, we have to think about how we can revitalize the agricultural system of the poor and how to make it more resilient. And this is where I think the concentration too much on rice, although rice is important, sawah sangat penting, jangan sawah aja, karena ada hasil penelitian dari Semeru kemarin, orang Indonesia, if we eat 1/3 dari makanan kita semestinya nasi, atau kalau di Australia kita makan potato atau kentang. Itu semestinya 1/3. Tapi kalau orang-orang desa bisa 80% atau 90% makanan mereka, itu nasi saja atau karbohidrat. Maka kita perlu mengajak masyarakat untuk menanam yang lain selain padi, selain sawah. Banyak orang di Aceh tidak, walaupun dulu berkebun, masyarakat muda tidak begitu berkebun dan kebun tidak seperti dulu. Maka kebudayaan membuka kebun yang dari dulu ada, waktu saya di Aceh awal di tahun 90-an masih ada kebudayaan itu dan masih tetap ada, tapi tidak diperhatikan oleh policy ya. Bagaimana semua bukit-bukit di Aceh yang ada kebun pohon-pohon, bagaimana itu dihidupkan kembali. Maka jangan kita memperhatikan sawah saja. Itu usulan saya antara yang lain. Ya. Sebenarnya itu kita perlu penelitian lebih lanjut. Kalau teman-teman di Aceh mau membantu, saya dengan senang hati mau melakukan penelitian seperti itu. Oke. Terima kasih ya.
Oke, thank you very much. Ini ada satu lagi pertanyaan dari Miftahul Jannah. What causes the corona is not resolved until this moment?
Bisa catat di catatan ya.
Yeah.
I can't, really difficult to understand. Oh ya, ada pertanyaan ini. Biasanya apa upaya dalam memperbaiki masalah ini? Maksudnya saya masalah ekonomi di COVID-19. So look, I think because I'm not an economist, maybe I should leave that to someone else. This is a huge question, and I think Indonesia banyak ahli ekonomi yang lebih menguasai bidang itu daripada saya. Saya pada dasarnya sosiolog. Maka mungkin kalau ada teman lain yang bisa menjawab itu. There's another question here. So pandemik di Indonesia lebih lama dari negara lain. Sebenarnya itu tidak tentu seperti itu. Lihat Amerika, wah luar biasa pandemik di Amerika. Di Eropa juga luar biasa. Maka bukan Indonesia saja yang menderita dari pandemik ini. Maka saya semoga pandemik ini bisa diatasi sebelum terlalu lama dan kita harus belajar dari ini. Jangan kita pandemik lagi sesudah ini. Sebenarnya saya tidak ada solusi untuk itu. Apa maksudnya bagi hasil? Sebenarnya kalau kita duduk dengan petani, misalnya kalau saya memiliki sawah, saya kasih kepada teman atau orang-orang lain di kampung, dan saya cuma yang menyewa tanah itu dari saya, dia tidak menyewa, kalau di Australia kita menyewa tanah, saya harus membayar dalam bentuk uang. Tapi biasanya di kampung, orang yang menyewa tanah, waktu dia panen, 1/3 dari padi, dari hasil produksi, dia harus kembalikan kepada orang itu yang punya sawah. Nah, sistem itu sebenarnya yang itu satu alasan mengapa banyak petani di Aceh menjadi susah, menjadi rumit. Karena mereka mengurangi 1/3 dari hasil pertanian untuk yang punya tanah, sementara itu 1/3 untuk membayar hutang. Maka dari misalnya 10 ton padi, mereka cuma simpan 3 ton di belakang rumah. Dan dari itu mereka harus membayar semua. Maka biasanya sebelum panen kedua, sudah habis stok yang di belakang rumah. Maka ada yang bilang bahwa mengapa orang desa-desa itu tidak makan yang bergizi karena kurang pendidikan. Saya sebenarnya sebagai, kalau boleh bilang, saya sedikit keberatan dengan itu. Karena saya lihat orang-orang desa itu tidak tentu bodoh. Misalnya, waktu baru panen, dia makanan lengkap. Tapi makin dekat dengan panen kedua, karena simpanan sudah habis, mereka mulai makan yang kurang bagus. Maka itu bukan soal pendidikan saja, tapi banyak faktor-faktor yang lain. Walaupun juga ada faktor pendidikan, saya mengakui itu. Tapi tidak 100%. Itu yang harus diperhatikan. Tapi makin dekat dengan panen kedua, karena simpanan sudah habis, mereka mulai makan yang soal pendidikan. Tapi banyak faktor-faktor. Walaupun juga okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor.
Yeah.
The time is over.
Okay.
So we can give applause for our professor.
And heartfelt gratitude